Talks but no recognition. That's what's on the agenda today as Taliban representatives go to Moscow to meet diplomats from Afghanistan's neighbouring countries. It's being seen as Russia's attempt to increase its influence in the region. Ahead of the talks, the Kremlin signalled that it was willing to provide aid for Afghans severely affected by the economic downfall that followed the Taliban takeover. DW's Nick Connolly is in Kabul. He asks people what they're expecting from the international community.
Customers are thin on the ground at this Kabul market, and anything but essential food items are proving almost impossible to shift in Afghanistan's capital these days, with the country's banks paralysed and economic activity at a standstill. This shopkeeper tells us his daily sales stand at €2. His daily costs amount to almost €50.
I'm 50 years old and I remember all the different governments this country has had. I've never seen the economy as bad as it is now. The Taliban don't have anything to eat themselves. You see them buying a bunch of bananas to share and eating just one each. If they're going hungry themselves, how are they going to keep the country fed?
2 months have passed since the Taliban captured Kabul and imposed strict limits on bank withdrawals to prevent a run on the banks. These traders' cash reserves are running dangerously low.
There's no business. Everything has just stopped. There's no money and everyone is paralysed. The international community must see how Afghanistan is suffering. I hope these talks bring some kind of positive result, but who knows?
These shopkeepers have banded together to negotiate a rent reduction, but whether that will keep them afloat for much longer is far from clear. Some say they're just a matter of days from closing up shop.
The international community needs to recognise this Taliban government. Otherwise, our money will stay frozen and there won't be any trade. What kind of message are they sending to ordinary Afghans?
For now, at least, the international community is preoccupied with the politics of whether or not to recognise Afghanistan's new Taliban government. But if the current situation continues for much longer, the politics might soon be overtaken by a humanitarian crisis on a scale few could have anticipated.
Our business is finished. We're struggling to pay the rent on our shop. Those are the kind of things that you hear in Kabul day in and day out from shopkeepers. While most people here are probably not following the details of the talks in Moscow, one thing they very certainly are feeling are the impact of Afghanistan's frozen bank accounts and an economic crisis that have left many here struggling to put food on the table.
So much so that for many here the economy has now overtaken security as their number one concern, something that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago.
Let's take you to DW correspondent Aaron Tilton, who's in Moscow, where today's talks are being held. Welcome, Aaron. Does Moscow's invitation to a Taliban delegation mean the Kremlin's ready to accept them as the country's official government?
No, official resignation or recognition, rather, is not on the table right now. That's something that we've heard both Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov repeat over and over in recent days. You have to remember the Taliban is still officially considered a terror organization by Moscow, and that's not something that's likely to change in the near future. They're not really willing to engage with the Taliban as the official rulers of Afghanistan simply because they say they've broken their promise to form an inclusive government. So right now, instead, they're focusing more on engaging in dialogue, but they're not ready to recognize them as the official, legitimate governing body in Afghanistan quite yet.
So what does Russia want these talks to achieve?
Well, they have a number of quite legitimate security concerns in the region. First and foremost is the specter of Islamist terror. Now, they seem to be worried about fighters from the Islamist State using Afghanistan to kind of as a base of operations, gaining access to training and weapons there, and then taking some type of terror attacks to both Moscow's partners in Central Asia and Russia as well. You have to remember that the entire region, and specifically Moscow as well, have been targeted, especially in the 90s and 2000s, by incredibly bloody attacks carried out by Islamist terrorists, and that's a scene that Moscow really doesn't want to see repeated in the near future. Then there's also the question of narcotics. Afghanistan has, of course, become a major hub of narcotics trade in recent years, thanks into large part by the Taliban actually using narcotics to fund their operations. And the destination for a lot of those drugs has been Moscow's partners in Central Asia and Russia itself, and they want to really kind of stymie that trade moving forward. So this is also about kind of engaging with their security partners in the region and seeing if there are some common points to developing a security architecture between the Taliban and Moscow's regional partners in Central Asia.
All right, stay with us, Aaron. We'll hear some opening remarks from Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, and come back to you.
The main unquestionable benefit of this format is that it unites Afghanistan with all neighboring countries without exceptions and other influential states of the region. We deplore the fact that this time our American colleagues chose not to participate in this event. We have noticed that it's the second time when the US is evading an extended Troika format.
Well, let's pick up on that point with Aaron Tilton. Aaron, does it matter that the US isn't at these talks?
I wouldn't necessarily read too much into that. I mean, the U.S., for its part, did engage in talks with the Taliban in recent days, and I think their decision not to engage in these talks today is more of a reflection of the poor diplomatic state of affairs between Moscow and Washington at the moment. You have to remember that both countries have been reducing their diplomatic staff in recent years, and I think this is more of a reflection of that, really of the poor diplomatic footing between the two countries, and less that the U.S. is unwilling to engage with the Taliban and engage with Afghans' future.
Aaron Tilton in Moscow, thank you.